So I'm Gloria Halverson, and I am humbled and grateful to be here with you today. Reverend Michael told us on Friday that we should be humble and grateful, and I am. I'm very humbled and grateful to be with you and to have this opportunity to share some insights and a little bit of my story. For those of you who don't regularly attend this service, and this past year we've been looking at world religions, and this month we've been looking at Judaism, and I have just loved this journey that Reverend Harriet has taken us on. So when she asked me to give this talk today, she said, speak about something that you're familiar with, and so I thought, I'm really good at getting lost. So what I want to talk to you today is getting lost and found, and I want to start by just taking a minute to look at the Exodus, which is the second book of the Torah and the Old Testament, and it tells the story of a small group of Israelites who leave slavery in Egypt around 3000 before Common Era, BCE, and they're led by their prophet Moses on a journey through the wilderness, and they wander for 40 years as nomads in the desert, and several miraculous things happen during this time. Moses is given the 10 Commandments. The Israelites form a covenant with God to remain faithful, and in return they are promised the promised land. And so eventually they settle in Canaan and build a temple and establish a civilization. So I am reminded of a time just a couple of years ago when I was physically lost in the desert. Well, it wasn't quite the desert, and it wasn't for 40 years, it was only for one day. But similar. And this was a road trip that I took with to a cousin's reunion with my sister Brenda and John, who were here from Australia. And my niece Millie, Brenda's and John's daughter, is here visiting me today, so I'm so glad to have her here. At this point, my Subaru was brand new. I mean, I'd had it maybe a couple of days, and so even on the way out of town, we checked with the Livermore Subaru about how to use the GPS. And it was in the early spring, and there had been many days of rain, so it was a really great year for wildflowers. And so Brenda had organized this trip down to San Diego for us in search of wildflowers. It was just remarkable. So we ended up at the National Monument Carrizo Plain, which is right in the San Luis Obispo, and it's described as a large enclosed grassland plain approximately 50 miles long and 15 miles across, sprawling open spaces centered around a salt lake surrounded by wildflowers, grasses, and mountains. So following as the GPS had directed us to go, we were directed down this very muddy one-lane road up this very steep hill and into this deep fog bank. And, by the time we started up this hill, we sort of questioned where this GPS was taking us, but there was no turning around. I mean, when you were on this thing, you were on your way up. The mud was so deep that the tires didn't have any tractions. I mean, they were just spinning. It was remarkable. At one point, I even got out of the car and walked and let John drive the car through this one-lane road with these drop-offs on either side. And I was all for abandoning the car altogether. I thought, let's just leave it. I'm walking down this hill. Somebody can have the car. I'll buy a new one. So eventually we get to the top of this road, and we come to where we're supposed to go, where the GPS is telling us to go, and the road is closed. Well, there was no way I was going back down that hill we just came up. So we found another road, and so we took this unidentified road, and we wandered around this beautiful plain with all these wildflowers for about 3 hours. No cars, no road signs, no other vehicles, nothing on the horizon, no buildings. It was just this beautiful, beautiful plain of wildflowers. But that's where we were. So eventually we came up to a car who said, "Oh yeah, I was going to go up that dirt road that you went up over that hill, but I realized it was be way too difficult, so I came all the way around, and here I am here now." So there are some parallels to the Israelites and their wanderings. And I'm wondering if you have had some of these same experiences in your life, where you think you're on a good path, and you have faith that you know where you're going. But all of a sudden, something unexpected interrupts your path, or there's something that makes you uneasy, and things start to fall apart. And you spend your time where you think you're making progress, but you're looping back into this place of being lost. For me, what it brought up was fears. Fears about not having resources. And now, we weren't going to die if we had ended up spending the night there. We had food, we had clothes, everything, it was fine. But it was still that fear that came up in me. And questioning where you're going, when you're going to get there, and what you'll find when you do get there. So the gift of this journey was that it gave me an opportunity to look at how I face things when I am feeling lost, when I'm in that position. And then also how my sister Brenda and John addressed the issue, which was very different than mine. I mean, I was coming from this place of, okay, we have to let somebody know where we are, but we couldn't. Nobody was answering the phones. The Park Service was all gone. We have to, contact somebody who can tell us how to get out. I'm fearful we may have to spend the night here. Brenda, my sister Brenda, opposite personality, is very calm, just taking things in stride. And John is just taking one step and then the next step. Okay, let's try this route. Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, well, let's try this route. No, that doesn't work. So what I learned from that, for me, my growing edge was to be open to new adventures and mysteries, to trust the outcome, and to retain my balance in the midst of surprises and unexpected events. And then to watch for the gifts. And one of this gift was this opportunity to really examine this, but another gift was the beauty that was around us. And after it was all over, a couple of days later, my sister Brenda and I exchanged an email, and Brenda wrote and said, it was an amazing journey, and it was harrowing, but she said, in spite of that, it was one of the most beautiful, memorable, visual experiences I'll ever have in my life. So it was remarkable. So let's go a little deeper than that. That's one way of being lost. But another way is the time when you recognize that there's a need for change, or you're not recognizing it, but you are getting reckoned with, either softly or harshly, something telling you that this isn't the place to you. It could be a vague sense of discomfort, or it could be something overwhelming that happens to you. Or maybe you're not realizing it yet at this moment. And David Foster Wallace, in his commencement address, tells the story of two young fish swimming along, and one happens to meet an older fish. And the older fish turns to these younger fish and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a while, and one turns to the other and says, "What the hell is water?" So, there are times when we are so immersed in what we're doing that unless a question comes up, or unless there's an opportunity to look at something, we may not realize, that maybe this is something we need to pay attention to. In my journey to look at being lost and found, I came across a great book by Rebecca Solnit, and it's called The Field Guide to Getting Lost. And in it, she talks about an ancient philosopher, Meno, who I hadn't heard of. And he asked this question: how will you go about finding that thing, the nature of which is totally unknown to you? So I'm wondering if you've ever been in those times when you know there's something out there, but you have no idea what it is or what you're looking for or how you're going to find it or how you're going to accomplish it. So Rebecca Solnit goes on to say, to be lost is to be fully present. And to be fully present is to be capable of being in uncertainty and mystery. That thing, the nature of which is totally unknown to you, is usually what you need to find. And finding it is a matter of getting lost. So it's just, there's just a point of celebration for us in this, in being lost. And though it may be uncomfortable for it, it does support us in building resilience and confidence. It can open up unforeseen paths that lead to a perfect resolution or offer limitless possibilities. And sometimes these things take time. We may be dealing with habit patterns, Michael Beckwith on Friday talking about intention deficit disorder, where maybe you're not, moving yourself forward or asking the right questions. So a couple challenges here is don't lose yourself in the lostness. Now, I can tell you, I have planted flags in my positions of being lost several times and hung pictures on the wall. It's not something I recommend doing, but sometimes it does take time. So there are times when you just need to persevere. And if you have to, you may need to wander in the desert for 40 years, but stay in the question. And there are always spiritual practices that can support you. Journaling, visioning, for those of you who don't know, it's a practice of really allowing. It's asking. It's not affirming. It's not declaring, but it's taking a position of asking, what is my greater good? What is my purpose? What am I here for? And there are times when we're lost when that's the best solution. The other thing I recommend is taking classes. It's these discussions that are really amazing. Millie called me after a class that she was in a couple of weeks ago, just to share where she was coming from and some of the stuff that was going on with her. It's a great place to be. So I want to just take one more moment and talk about the deeper, darker side of being lost. And this is a good week to talk about that because there are a lot of stories out there, a lot of people who have been triggered by the events going on in the Senate and the Senate hearings. And I've been there myself, and there are times when I'm there when I feel like I'm in an abyss, and I feel like I can't even find my way out. And I have these thoughts, okay, now Reverend Harriet told me to do something. What am I supposed to do? What color is it? What am I supposed to ask? What am I supposed to do? And those are the kinds of times that I'm talking about here. Now, I do want to clarify, as Reverend Michael reminded us on Friday, that in eternity there are no issues, no problems in the mind of God. But we're living in a human realm here. And so we do encounter these things. And so what we want to do is to be sure that we are touched by these events, that we are taking the opportunity to explore what our message is, what our challenge is, what we are here to learn about this, what we are here to uncover, so that we can embrace and transmute it to a higher frequency. If we simply ignore the point that we're lost and just affirm our way out of it, then we're losing the opportunity, and it will come back again, because until we reach a point of resolution on these things, they're going to continue to come back. So it is true that the more you are in alignment with your presence, your problems, the problems will continue to arise, but the more you are aligned, the less you will be in a position of effort and struggle. So again, I suggest the same spiritual practices. Do your shadow work, examine the meaning, the issues behind the challenges, do your journaling. And one thing that my spiritual mentor and teacher has told me when I'm in that abyss where I can't get out is to surrender to God. To surrender to God. And Reverend Michael spoke about the same thing on Friday, and he talked about a time when he feared he was drowning, and he just asked God for help. And whatever your term is for spiritual presence, there is a higher presence and higher power, and I suggest that that's available for you to use. So we're each on our own individual paths, which is just amazing, isn't it, that we that there are as many of us sitting in this room, there are individual paths, and that is just multiplied and multiplied for all of our people. And my quest for you today is to celebrate the richness and depth in all sides of life, in both the light and the dark, and the lost and being found. I have frequently felt that, geez, at this age, don't you think I'd have this all figured out? So I also want to say to those of you who sometimes have those feelings that, it's all an individual thing, and I really cherish the times, the depth and the struggles that I go through, because it makes me deeper and richer. And Shenru Suzuki talks about the fact that the slowest racehorse is the best racehorse, because that's the one that has to work the hardest, that has the most depth and richness in the recovery. So Reverend Harriet always leaves us with an invitation, and my invitation to you this week is to be fascinated with this journey that is your life and make a commitment to celebrate both the dark and the light and the lost and the found. So I think I have one more minute, and I promised you a poem. I'm going to read this poem, and for those of you who have been in classes with me, I have friends up at the ranch, Tom and Jill, and Tom is an amazing person, and frequently I write poems about or for Tom. And Tom always talks about twisty roads. He really likes twisty roads. He doesn't like, I asked him to put a path in my property to go up to the edge of my property where I overlook the riverbed, and the path goes like this. I love it. It's exactly perfect. So this is a poem for twisty roads. I thank God for the twisty roads in my life, for zigzagging paths and deer trails less traveled, for byways from highways and indirect routes, where I meander and wander and surrender to stillness and revel in drifting, sometimes lost, sometimes found, but always enlivened at what lies ahead. I drink with my eyes, I hear with my heart, I sing with the chorus of life's harmonious strumming, and dwell in recovery and discovery, whilst knowing, revealing, and being my true self. My life, greater than ordinary, maybe less than extraordinary, but always profoundly, distinctly, and passionately mine.